Hello there. Welcome to Family Cafe's workshop, Mental Health Recovery and the Role of Families in the Recovery Process. These workshops are part of Cafe TA Center's commitment to mental health and supporting families. Each one has an accompanying workbook that you can find on the webpage where you are viewing this video. My name is Kirsten Drybra, and I'm a family peer support worker at All In Family Peer Support. I am also a family peer support worker and trainer at the mental health education and strategy firm, Robin Preece Live Your Truth. For a little bit more about me, have a look at my bio in the workbook. You will also learn a bit more about my own family's mental health journey, as I am the co-writer of this workshop series, and I will be your narrator for all 5 workshops. The other co-writer of this series is Charlotte Sitnick. Her bio is in the workbook as well. Through these workshops, I will share part of my family story as well as Charlotte's. The speed dating version of me. I am a mom of 2 adult daughters. I have been married for almost 30 years to my husband Keith, and I am a supporter of a family member who lives with a mental health diagnosis. I share my own experiences raising a family while supporting a daughter with a complex mental health diagnosis. I am not a clinician or a therapist. I do have years of lived experience as a family member and also experience and training in peer support. Before I continue, I want to define what I mean by family. Family to me is whatever family is to you. Family is not held to a traditional standard where you need to share a surname or a bloodline. Family can also be family of choice. Those folks in your story that are near and dear to you and who you consider family. You may be here in the role of a parent, caregiver, best friend, co-worker, sibling, neighbor. You get the idea. I will use the term family throughout this workshop, and it is all-inclusive. I also want to remind you, if you watch the introduction video, that although these videos are directed to you as a family member supporting someone, we want to share about family peer support and how it may support you as well. You may be wondering what family peer support is all about. In sections 1 and 2 of the workbook, there is information about family peer support. There is also information about the Cafe TA Center and Robin Preece Live Your Truth and what they're all about. If you would like to go straight to the workshop information, you can skip to section 3 of your workbook. You will need section 3 to follow the video and partake in the activities. There is also additional information to reference in section 3 that is not tied directly to the workshop activities. You may want to have a look at this information during the workshop or stick to the activities and reference the workbook later on. Please feel free to pause this video at any time and to proceed when you are ready. There is no time limit. You have options here. This information may have immediate value to you, or you can wait and reference it later. Section 4 of your workbook is all about definitions and resources from all 5 of the workshop series. At any time, you can head to this section to find a definition or to clarify context. Section 5 of your workbook is all about hope, planning, and you. There are a few activities and tools here that I ask you to think about. You, your future, your plans, and your well-being. All 5 of the workshops tackle separate subjects intended to support you, the family member of someone living with a mental health challenge or dual diagnosis, mental health challenge and substance use. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, SAMHSA, defines dual diagnosis as someone having a serious mental illness and substance use disorder. From this point on, where we say mental health challenge, we also include dual diagnosis, but for simplicity, we will just use the one term. We develop these workshops and videos this way so that you can do them all or choose the ones that speak to you. We believe that clinical support is good, but support services for family members are not always accessible and can be challenging to find. And to be honest, unless you've experienced a mental health challenge or dual diagnosis in your own family, you are likely unaware of the impact and the heartbreak this has on all family members. That is why we so strongly believe in family peer support and speaking from experience. All our workshops are written and presented through the lens of lived experience and the values of peer support. Your presenters and stories shared will come from someone who has been there, seen some hard stuff, and figured out how to not only survive, but also to thrive. Thank you for joining us. In this workshop, you will look at your own existing beliefs around recovery and wellness for both the person you're supporting and your entire family. How recovery is defined by the individual and by the family plays a critical role in the recovery process. We will have you take a hard look at your own agenda and how this agenda may be hampering the recovery process for the entire family. Finally, we will discuss your role as a supporter and how your actions can change the family recovery story for the better. In my experience, society has a shared understanding about recovery in relation to general health issues. With a physical illness, you recover and you have a recovery process from a broken bone, an accident, a flu, food poisoning, or even a heart attack. What is less common in society is the understanding of recovery from a mental health challenge, both for an individual and for the family. Often, when I am providing family peer support, the family has not even considered recovery from a mental health challenge as a possibility. This particularly shows up when a diagnosis from a psychiatrist is put forth that leaves the family with more questions than answers. I would like to share with you two stories of families I worked with. The first family, I remember a conversation I had with parents of a young adult that had recently been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. To put this in context, their daughter had been struggling for years. Life was really hard for their daughter and for the entire family. After an episode of what is often referred to as mania and a hospital stay, their daughter was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. During this conversation, it became clear that because of this diagnosis, the parents no longer saw a positive future for their daughter. The parents' fear was that the behaviors their daughter was having that led to this hospital stay were now how life was going to be forever, for her and for them. What the parents could not put into context was this: recovery and wellness are absolutely possible for everyone living with bipolar disorder and any mental health challenge or addiction. When I explored this more with these parents, it was like they had never even considered this as their family's reality. A couple things I want to touch on here before I move on. First, the medical service provider their daughter was connected to was not recovery-based. What I mean by this is that through the care their daughter received, she and her parents were left to believe that this was how life would be with a bipolar diagnosis. There was no beacon of light or hope offered. Clearly, this was not a recovery or a strength-based service. The entire family was left feeling hopeless. The second point I want to share is the impact the daughter felt from both the health service provider and from her parents. This is what I call learned helplessness. Let me explain. The daughter's health service provider was telling her that she can't do, and her parents were sending the same negative message. The daughter was falling into learned helplessness. She was told others had to do for her because she could not do for herself. And she started to believe that and live as this was true. Makes sense because this was the message she was hearing. Recovery and hope were never put forward, and the entire family was really struggling. The second family story I would like to share with you is another family I worked with. In this family, the adult son had been struggling for some time. Their life was similar to the first family and just as hard. The parents and their son found themselves on long wait lists for certain health services. Typically, once they accessed a service, they were gravely disappointed with the support they found or the lack of it. The tenacity of the son, with the support of his parents, kept this family looking for something more. Finally, a health service was accessed that seemed positive, and the son felt it was a good fit. Through this service, the son also was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. This recovery and strength-based service had several treatment service options. Through this health service, the son and his family found hope. They felt they had found the answers to many questions. The son felt empowered as an active participant in the decision-making process of his own care, and the family had access to supports as well. The entire family was embracing a positive future. The idea of recovery, regardless of what that looks like to you, gives an individual and a family hope. Without hope, we often fall into despair and even into learned helplessness. In the world of peer support, we believe that every single person living with a mental health challenge and their family can recover. How recovery is embraced and the role of the family will greatly impact the wellness of not only the individual, but also the entire family. In this workshop, we will look at the foundations for recovery and wellness. How recovery is defined by the individual and by the family plays a critical role in the recovery process. We will have a hard look at our own agenda and how this agenda may be hampering the recovery process for the entire family. Finally, we will discuss and define the role of a supporter on the family recovery and wellness journey. Before we begin, please turn to page 93 in your workbook and take a moment to think about what brought you here today. There's a place in your workbook to write your thoughts. First, let's think of recovery for an individual. SAMHSA's working definition of recovery is: recovery is defined as a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. To build on this, let's first discuss what recovery is not. It is not a destination, although some may choose to identify with this, and that's okay. For example, some people say they are recovered. Some say they are always in recovery or recovering. It is not a model. Some people say it's a model, but we prefer to say it's a philosophy. It is not something that can be delivered or given to someone. People have to work out what it means for them. It is not always symptom-free. People can live a good life with or without symptoms. For some, it may be working out how to live with symptoms. I think of a story Robin shares about a friend of theirs who sees pink snakes everywhere, eats them, sleeps with them, and they've learnt out how to live with them and live a full life. What is recovery? It is something different and unique to everyone. My idea of recovery may look quite different from yours. It is the word recovery to some people, and some people don't like that word recovery at all. Although we use the word recovery or wellness, and it is really about well-being and living your best life. Everyone can recover. It is about whether people step into it. Sometimes people don't find the tools that work for them and they struggle. Others may be scared to step into the unknown, being well, when all they have ever known is being unwell. They may be comfortable in this discomfort. It is self-directed and about self-determination. For some people with substance use issues, it may be abstinence, for some harm reduction, for some medication assisted, for some not. For some with mental health issues, it may be no symptoms. For some, it may be working how to live a great life with symptoms. It is hope. This is crucial. It is about focusing on what happened to a person rather than what's wrong with a person. It is how we live our lives. It is personal and it is about choice. It is a lifelong journey for some, and for some it is not. Again, recovery is an incredibly unique experience for each and every person. I have another workbook activity on page 94. Think about a time when you had to recover from something in your life that was not mental health related, such as a breakup, a loss of a job, a death, a great disappointment, or perhaps a sickness. Can you think of what hindered and what helped you through this time? Were there any skills or tools that helped you navigate this difficult time? Please go to your workbook for this activity. Here is a video from Europe talking about recovery. Why show a European video? Because this concept of recovery is everywhere in the world, not just North America. Although this video is from an individual's perspective, we will connect the dots to recovery for families as we move along.
Recovery is me being the person I can be.
For me, recovery is learning to accept what has happened and then overcoming what has happened and go ahead with your life, fighting and taking risks and sometimes having success, sometimes having failures like anybody else.
And we talk about recovery isn't waiting for the storm to pass, it's learning to dance in the rain.
For us, I think the most important thing is it's about living a good and meaningful life. And that's whether you're presenting or experiencing symptoms of mental health problems or not. It's also, for some people, described as an ongoing journey or a process that can last for many years, if not a lifetime. However, for other people, recovery is an endpoint. There is an endpoint at which point they consider themselves to be recovered, and whatever that might mean for them.
Recovery, first of all, for me means belief in yourself. So if a person has this belief in his own abilities to change something.
The first barrier is very important, is the stigmatization, the stigmas.
Stigmatization, but I don't like the word stigmatization. I rather describe it as discrimination.
Societal attitudes, stigma and discrimination can be a real barrier.
And I think partly that comes from the stigma and discrimination that people experience as a result of having mental health problems.
If you want to really start that recovering process, you need to allow yourself the time needed to recover. You cannot recover in just a minute. It's a question of time.
Oh Lord, well there are quite a few misconceptions of recovery, unfortunately.
I think there are two major misconceptions. The first one is to believe that it is a result. So it's not a result, it's really a way. So recovery is not the end of the symptoms forever. Sometimes it is. That's a good thing.
Well, actually, I heard about two misconceptions about recovery. First is that recovery means absence of any symptoms. So you have to be completely normal, completely usual, like any other person. But this is ridiculous because we all are unique and you cannot be usual.
I think it's sometimes unhelpful because the word recovery in relation to physical health often means cure or getting better. And when we talk about recovery in mental health, we don't necessarily mean cure. We do mean achieving a better state of well-being and perhaps mental well-being, but that doesn't mean that your life is totally free from the effects or the symptoms of mental illness or mental ill health.
That it's just not possible for some people who are maybe too ill, that it's an excuse to cut services, that it's an excuse to just try and get people back into work who aren't well enough to be in employment. Yeah, there are several misconceptions.
Hopeful and possible.
Recovery is about hope.
I would say self-belief.
Hope is an important aspect of recovery. So having hope, holding on to hope and being hopeful for the future are all things that contribute to people beginning the journey to recovery. And recovery is a journey, so that's another word to describe it, it's a journey. But hope for us also means home, opportunity, people and empowerment. And we use that as a framework to actually identify the work that we do to support people on their journey to recovery.
Well, for me, that one word is chime. I mean, I really do think it's a really handy word. It's a nice sounding word. It's a positive word, and those are all things that I think for me do encapsulate recovery.
Recovery is a process.
Your support means everything for people.
It's just empathy, respect, and solidarity.
It's to really bring themselves to the process and think of themselves as equals to and partners with the people that are accessing their services.
Be by their side. Give love, give empathy, and accept risks.
And you have to remember that there is not us and them. We all are people.
If you have a friend or a member of your family who experiences mental ill health, it's very important that you continue to be there and that you continue to be yourself and you keep talking.
I think hope is very important, but you cannot have just faith in the future. Hope has to be based on reality.
Say yes, where there is hope, there is recovery, or where there is hope, there is the possibility of recovery.
I am myself. Today I feel more and more connected to myself. So the message is remain connected to yourself, whatever the other people may think of you.
Don't give up. We have an extra value. We have gone through certain things that nobody else goes, and we want to be as any other citizen.
Never give up on your hopes and dreams, because I believe if you've got hopes and dreams, you can make them happen, and there's always hope.
We as professionals need to be alongside people with mental health problems and supporting them on the journey, on the path to recovery.
I think freedom is the most important thing, and to be free you have to have choices.
Recovery can and does happen, and the more people that know about that, the better.
I have another workbook activity for you on page 95. This is a two-part exercise. Please reflect on your thoughts around recovery and the concepts shared while watching this video. For me, the key messages I saw in this video and I would like to share are these. No journey is the same. Recovery and well-being can mean living with symptoms or living without symptoms. Recovery is on a continuum for all of us, and only you can define what recovery means for you. Recovery could be said to be about accepting what happened to you and overcoming it. This is true for individuals and for families. Perhaps you can relate to this back to the first workbook activity when you reflected on something you recovered from in the past. I heard one person in this video say that to support another in their recovery, you need to have empathy, respect, solidarity, and to be equal partners. For some people, taking risks and sometimes falling is part of their process. I can tell you the number of false starts that my daughter had, and this was part of her recovery process. I will share this story first off with all of you. Ernest is a middle-aged man. In his words, he spent the better part of the past 24 years working out how to live with schizophrenia. He will tell you the first 20 were incredibly difficult, and his last 4, he feels, have been good. He is proud of his story. He lives in a building that supports folks struggling with housing. He has embraced the role of a supporter in his community and offers his support to those that are looking to chat and learn how he got where he is today. To Ernest, his community is his family, and supporting his family is important to him. Ernest shares that he has had to work out a few strategies to separate himself from some of the difficult stories he hears as a way to nurture his own well-being and support his own wellness. I know I am not responsible for the choices some folks make. I listen without judgment and share things that worked in my life. I see some folks making the same mistakes over and over again. I do not get frustrated or disappointed. I let them know they have the power to do things differently and to make different choices when they are ready. This is about them, it's not about me. By sticking to this belief, I do not take this personally. I am not disappointed or upset, and I do not carry this negativity with me. This is how I protect my own mental health, and this is part of my recovery. These are his words. Resiliency, empowerment, and hope. These are the 3 core recovery components that a family member can help nurture. First, let's look at resiliency. This is our ability to bounce back during hard times. Some days we have more and some days we have less. It is our ability to appropriately adapt to the stress and the adversity. The thing about resiliency is it fosters and it's learned through adversity. And adversity is hard. Remember I spoke about my daughter's false starts and how it was okay to fall down at times? This was part of her recovery process. And, in fact, that is part of everyone's in life. We fall down and we get back up. Kind of like riding a bike. Nobody can teach us what balance is. They say a little, and we have to work out what balance is. We fall off, skin our knees, get back on again, and then we get it. That's like recovery. Here's the thing that families want to think about. They may need to fall down if you rush in, and I certainly did at times, often, to pick them up, to save, solve, fix their situation and the problems for them. You can actually be robbing your family member of the opportunity to build that resiliency, to problem solve and figure things out for themselves. Now I know from my own experience that the act of fixing, saving, and solving came with the best of intentions. Honestly, I found it hard to sit on the sidelines while my daughter was hurting or struggling. And I now know, in hindsight and through much experience, that sitting still and not reacting and rushing in would have been an opportunity of learning resilience for my daughter. Let's talk about hope. Hope is that thing that is going to be better than the now, especially in hard times. Hope is the motivator for change. Hope is not tangible. You cannot see it or deliver it to someone else. And I do believe that hope can be somewhat contagious, as well as hopelessness can be contagious too. When our family member is losing or has lost hope, we can hold hope for them as a supporter. I know that sometimes hope can also be a word that some people don't like. Let's look at empowerment. Empowerment is something within. I often talk about empowerment. That is where we have the power within ourselves. Sometimes we just need people to support us to see that it's there. It is the strength within that fosters hope and the belief that you can do, as opposed to you can't do. Since recovery is self-directed and self-determined, it makes sense that empowerment is an important component of recovery and the family recovery story. I have another workbook activity for you. On page 96, there is space to reflect and make notes on your thoughts when you think of resiliency, hope, and empowerment. How do these words show up in your family's mental health journey? On page 97 in your workbook, I have a few more questions for you to think about. Please take all the time you need to reflect and to write your thoughts on these 3 questions. Please read one question and answer completely before moving on to the next. First question: what does recovery and well-being look like to you for the family member who is struggling with a mental health challenge? Next question: what does recovery and well-being look like for yourself? Yes, I mean just you. This may be the first time you are thinking about this, and that's okay. Last question: can you be in a place of recovery and well-being even if your family member is not? You may want to pause the video and take all the time you need. If these 3 questions were hard, I totally get it. I remember a time in my life where my answers to these questions would have been this: what does recovery and well-being look like to you for your family member who is struggling with a mental health challenge? Well, for me, recovery and well-being were when my daughter would be happy, healthy, functioning, and engaging in life again. Next question: what does recovery and well-being look like for yourself? Well, for me, my answer would have been, I do not need recovery. I am here to find answers to save, solve, and fix my daughter. Okay, maybe I would have used other words here, but they would have been explaining much the same. Last question: can you be in a place of recovery and well-being even if your family member is not? Well, my answer would have been a hard no. I will be in my recovery when I have peace and my daughter is functioning, working, maybe even thriving and managing her own life. This will be my place of recovery. Maybe your answers went something like mine, or maybe not. There is no right or wrong answer, just what came up for you. Here is a quote of the family recovery definition by the Mental Health Commission of Canada. The idea of recovery is approached from a slightly different perspective. The family member strives to recover from the emotional turmoil, grief, and/or fatigue that may result from caring for someone with a mental health challenge or illness. The family member's path to their own mental wellness or recovery is likely to be enhanced by a better understanding of their loved one's illness and through the development of more effective coping skills. Greater confidence, accepting the situation, and having hope for their loved one will help them to be more effective caregivers and supporters, while also helping them to sustain their own well-being. We refer to this as having achieved a level of readiness. Please take a moment to take this quote in. Does anything speak to you? You may want to pause the video and write what you are thinking. There's a place on page 98 to write your thoughts. For myself, the introduction of this quote was a pivotal moment. First, I felt incredibly validated. I read this in a time of great stress, a time when I was losing hope, and a time when I can now identify myself as being wounded or carrying great battle fatigue. Let me explain. To me, battle fatigue means this. I had been living in survival mode for a long time. The chronic stress started to take its toll on me both physically and mentally, although I did not see this at the time. I was unwell and my own well-being was fractured. Here is the line that really spoke to me in this definition. The family member strives to recover from the emotional turmoil, grief, and/or fatigue that may result from caring for someone with a mental health challenge or illness. I remember reading this and thinking it is okay to feel like I am wounded, fractured, and need help. Wait a minute, I too have something that I need to recover from? It is okay to feel like I feel? The feeling of validation was comforting for me at that time. The second line that really spoke to me was, the family member's path to their own mental wellness or recovery is likely to be enhanced by a better understanding of their loved one's illness and through the development of more effective coping skills. Here's what I remember thinking. Okay, wait, I have my own path and my own mental wellness, and this does matter? I matter? At the time, this was a foreign concept and one that I realized I needed to embrace and bring into my world, not only for my own well-being, but for the well-being of my entire family. I remember this quote was on my mind for days after. I would read it over and over again. Let's get back to the questions. Can you be in a place of recovery and well-being if your family member is not? Although everyone is unique around their own experiences with recovery and well-being, the answer to this question is yes. Yes, it is absolutely possible for you, the family member and perhaps caregiver, to be in a place of recovery and wellness, even if the family member you are supporting is not there. Remember the line in the family recovery definition? Greater confidence, accepting the situation, and having hope for their loved one will help them be more effective caregivers. When we care for ourselves and nurture our own well-being, we have more to offer our entire family. And we can be more effective supporters for our family member who has a mental health challenge. What I would like you to think about is this. You have your own story. You have your own identity, and you have your own path of recovery and wellness that only you can walk. Looking back at my own family's story, I can now see how I lost so much of myself in my quest to save and solve my daughter's mental health challenge. Honestly, I even combined our lives and our identities at times to the we I often spoke of. We had a tough night. We had a doctor's appointment coming up. We were working on figuring out some stuff, or we were having either a good day or a bad day. Not only had I created this we story I was living, but I was getting stuck in the story at times. Here is what I mean by stuck. When things are hard, I was getting comfortable with this, and it was just the way it was. I didn't even realize it at the time. I was conditioning myself to what I was living as being normal, for lack of a better word, when there was nothing normal or healthy about it. I started getting comfortable with all of this, living in the chaos, living with the battle fatigue, and living unwell myself. I did not see it at the time, but I was promoting learned helplessness in both my daughter and myself. That we was coming up often, and it showed up like, we cannot go back to school. It's just not going to work. Or, we have been through so much. It makes sense that she cannot work or manage her appointments right now. I am not sure if you can relate to my experience. It was not until I stopped over-identifying with the past and what had happened in my family story, and I separated myself and stopped identifying with that we story, that I realized I had been through some hard stuff too. And I had some healing and some work to do to find my own path of recovery and my own well-being that only I could walk alone. Once I realized all of this, I began to reclaim my own identity, my own life. And I started the process of recovery just for me. Remember, there are two stories. The story of your family member experiencing a mental health challenge, who you may be supporting, and the story of you. The one with your own needs, your own feelings, experiences, your own challenges, own past, own future, and your own path and process of recovery. Remember, your recovery is self-determined and self-directed too. I also think of the story I heard from a dad who raised Catholic and is parenting a child who is part of the LGBTQIA2S+ community. In his words, "This is a struggle I have in supporting my child who is part of the LGBTQ community. What I have believed as part of my religion and who my child is have been a personal conflict for me. This is a part of my recovery story, which is not part of my child's recovery story. This is separate. The power of peer support and why this was part of my healing was spending time with other parents who have gone through something similar. I needed support from them, and they have become part of my community. For me, my faith was a big part of my recovery. And for me, I had to adjust my beliefs and still be a Christian because I was not changing being a parent. I have a new and improved recovery that works for me and my own mental health." And those were his words. Looking at our own recovery also ties into us looking at our own self-care. This whole concept is part of what we talked about in the workshop, Just for Caregivers. In it, we discuss self-care, that you get to support your own recovery, your wellness, and be at your best for yourself and others. It's your journey through whatever you are dealing with. So how do we stay in the supporting role and let go of your own agenda? I have already shared my past reaction to fix, save, and solve. What typically came along with this was my own idea of what her life should or should not look like. I refer to this as our own agenda. I want to share a story. We were supporting a clinician that needed support as a mom whose adult child was struggling. She kept telling us that she was a clinician, like she should be able to fix her child's struggles because of what she did for a living. The adult child wanted to try a holistic approach that went against everything the clinician mom thought would be right. Many arguments had occurred before she came to us, and we supported her to try stepping back and giving her daughter the proverbial reins to her life. The mom gave her encouragement to map out her own plan of recovery, As the mom sat in her own discomfort, but kept an open mind and a non-judgmental approach to a curious conversation with her daughter, her child began to build her own resiliency, take on ownership of her own mental health, and began to empower herself. It was no longer an argument, but that of a conversation as to what was working and what she needed to work on more. Was the daughter's path perfect? No. But she figured out what worked best for her, and the mom worked out what worked best to support her child while also supporting her own fears and worries. So, we were supporting the mom to look at her agenda and what that looked like for her. We have identified that recovery is self-directed and self-determined. You can see why our own agenda would not serve the recovery process well or your role as a supporter. Going back in time, I was so not in the supporting role. In fact, I am quite sure my agenda was the obstacle in my daughter's recovery story at one time. So, you can see why we phrase it as letting go of your own agenda. What does that look like in relation to the supporting role? If you are going to stay in the role of a supporter, the relationship needs to be based on mutuality, trust, and respect. Now that we have looked at the fundamentals of recovery for both you and your family member, I hope this makes sense to you. Let's break this down. Mutuality, the positive, interactive relationship between two people. There is no one better or less than the other. There is good communication and a sense of understanding that exists. Think of being collaborative in a process with equality. Trust. To trust involves placing our confidence in another person. Without trust, you cannot be in a supporting role. This is crucial. Respect. This involves deep admiration for another. You can accept someone for who they are, even when they are different from you, or you disagree. Respect in a relationship builds feelings of trust, safety, and well-being. Now that we have identified mutuality, trust, and respect in context of your role as a supporter to a family member, you may see why, if we bring that own agenda into the relationship, our role as a supporter will fail, even with the best of intentions. So, how do you not bring your own agenda with you in your role as a supporter? Just start with an honest and open conversation that explores the thoughts, feelings, and the dreams of your family member. There is no room for your judgment or your ideas. You may want to use open-ended questions such as, what does recovery or well-being look like to you? Or, what are your dreams for your life? I really want to know. Or, what steps do you see ahead of you that will help you achieve those dreams? Or, what does that feel like? I would like to hear more about that. Can you tell me? It is engaging in a very curious conversation of exploration with your family member. Listen actively, like you are absorbing every single word you are hearing, like this is the most interesting information you have heard in a really long time. Remember, there is no room for your own agenda. Your family member is leading the conversation and steering it where they want to go. There is no place for you to save, solve, or fix anything at all. This is not your role as a supporter. Even when the obvious presents itself, you need to stay away from fixing. Instead, try to put a question back to your family member that may have them come up with an answer from within themselves. Remember, self-determination and self-directed. You may find that your idea of recovery and your family member's idea of recovery are quite different, and this is okay. I encourage you to do a self-check-in from time to time with your role as a supporter. See if you are upholding mutuality, trust, and respect. And we are not going to get it right all the time. We do our best to stay in that supporting role. At times you may slip up, and that's okay. Learn from it and get back to your role as a supporter. If you have not had a chance to watch our workshop on communication, this might be of interest to you. In that workshop, we look at our communication styles and habits and how we can change areas that need some work so we can better support our family member. I have another workbook activity on page 99. We have a list of open-ended questions. They are there as suggestions on how to get started. I encourage you to take some time and reflect on what questions may work for you and with your family member. This exercise is intended to get you thinking about starting your own family's collaborative process. With the information shared in this workshop, I hope you've gained a better understanding of recovery and of wellness, and what that looks like for your family member, your entire family, and what that looks like for you. We have looked at the foundations of recovery and how you can uphold the core components of recovery through your own actions. And really, our own actions are the only thing we can control in relation to your family's mental health journey. Although it may be human nature for you to want to react in the way of fixing, saving, and solving during hard times, this may hinder the recovery process for all. If you can embrace the true role of a supporter, not only will your family member benefit, but your entire family will benefit as well. And finally, please remember that you have your own recovery and wellness process that is equally as important as your family member. There is a place on page 100 to write down your 3 takeaways from our workshop. If you could go back in time and share advice around the recovery and wellness journey to the you of the past, what would you say?
I would first tell that you of the past that stuffing feelings doesn't work. We don't heal if we don't feel. And I would tell that person to find an outlet for them to be able to express the pain, whether it's a support group or singing or even exercise. And there's lots of healthy ways that we can be able to process getting out in nature. A lot of those things. Being your own best friend, I would say be compassionate to that little girl or little boy inside me.
I often wish I could go back in time and give advice to my past self. If that were possible, I would have 2 messages. One is to relax, and the other is to place more trust in my loved one's ability to decide what is best for his life at any point in time. This may seem odd, as many of us as supporters have seen our loved ones in a crisis where we believe they are not in a position to make good decisions, or they may make decisions that we feel are not in their best interest for their future well-being or not coming from the right place. Peer support has opened my eyes to the need for respecting the self-determination of our loved ones. I would never have agreed with that perspective in the past, as I would have thought it would be giving up. I think I had to have been at a certain point in time where I was ready to hear that information and to accept it. Having intervened for so many years, I believe my actions rarely improved the situation for my loved one and often impacted our relationship in a negative way. I came across a couple of excerpts from a book that could be applied to my involvement over the years. One point was that perhaps I was getting so involved because of my own apprehension about the future, or that my need for control and involvement was to keep my loved one close. If I'm honest with myself, I think that those reasons hit the mark. And as family members, we would do anything to ease the burden for our loved ones who have developed mental health challenges, and we don't see our involvement as anything but necessary to their wellness and well-being. The other important point that I found to be powerful was that perhaps I didn't have the right to stop my loved one from making his own decisions, living with the outcomes of those decisions, and having the opportunity to learn from the consequences, positive and negative. While I have regrets about my past approach, I do recognize that I was doing the best I could at the time in highly stressful situations. I'm now very grateful for the opportunity to change my perspective going forward. And I've already made strides in that regard. I have communicated to my loved one that going forward, the decisions made on his own without my involvement will be what he believes are best for him, and that I support the fact that it is his life to lead. I would also tell myself to relax. That's not easy for me even today. However, through accessing my own peer support, I've met members of other families who have put a higher focus on attention to their own wellness, and that has made them more effective supporters. Can we go back? I'm going to pause. Okay. I would also tell myself to relax. This is not easy for me still today. However, through accessing my own peer support, I have met members of other families who have put a higher focus on attention to their own well-being, which has made them more effective supporters, and it has had a positive impact on their loved ones' well-being. I remember in times of crisis, the sense of panic as I tried to gather information, consider implications, and make decisions that I thought would mitigate the negative effects for my loved one. I also threw myself into my work as a way to escape for some of the time, and I didn't focus on what I needed to do for myself. At a particularly challenging point, I learned about meditation and began practicing it daily. I know that it helped me get through that situation, and that is my go-to today. When life gets stressful, I take time to do some additional meditation. And other wellness activities are also impactful, such as taking a walk and gardening. And I know that taking time out for the things that make me healthier will result in my being happier. And that translates to better relationships with everyone in my life.
What does recovery look like to you as a family member? What does recovery look like to you for the family member you are supporting?
I think that recovery for myself has already begun. After changing my perspective on how best to support my loved one, I've learned to accept and better understand his situation and his perspective. While I might not agree with the decisions he makes, I no longer question them. Instead, I express that I have confidence that he will manage the outcomes of his decisions the way he sees fit. This is, to a large degree, having a positive impact. And I still have fears that I try to stifle, but I try to counter those fears with a greater focus on the hope for the future of my loved one while taking one day at a time. At first, I saw recovery for my loved one as full recovery to where he was when he started having challenges, and expected that there would be optimal management of mental health challenges with treatments that would ensure a sustainable full life. Now I see recovery for my loved one is about making his own decisions, living with the outcomes, and most importantly, learning from those consequences. As with the change in the definition of recovery for myself, I originally believed that to give up on my definition of wellness for my loved one was a form of giving up on him. Now, though, I see that the best path forward is the one my loved one will choose. I'm there to support, but I'm no longer taking control and trying to fix things or make them go away.
Well, going back in time, I would have said something very different than what I'm going to share with you now. And recovery for me means that I feel whole again, that my wellness is nurtured, that my life is not completely consumed with the fact that my daughter is struggling with poor mental health. So recovery for me means moving forward to a place of wellness and feeling whole and having hope and living the life that I choose to live, nurturing that life and making it a life worth living, and fulfilling my dreams. That's recovery for me. Now, recovery for my daughter, I would have told you in the past that if my daughter was doing A, B, C, and D and thriving and working full time with an education, and that she would be in recovery. Today, I would tell you that recovery for my daughter means that she is living the life that she chooses to live, and that life is sustainable for her, that she can support herself. She's taking ownership of her health and life choices, and she's happy. She's happy. And recovery would be her living in wellness with her mental health diagnosis, managing her health, her mental health, and physical health, and feeling well and functioning, being happy, having friends, having a job, living on her own. To me, that's living in wellness. Forget the education, forget a lot of things, and just living the life that brings her happiness and joy while she manages her mental and physical health.
What do you see in the future for both you and your family? How do you feel about this future?
I must admit that I live with daily apprehension for the future of my loved one and for myself as I question what will happen and how I will react to future outcomes. I always tell myself not to borrow trouble, not to worry about what hasn't happened yet, because the possible directions are endless. And in accessing peer support, I was reminded to appreciate the quiet times in life where I can explore new things and work on my goals. And I tell myself to let go of the thoughts of what might happen and put the focus on today, for that is all I really have to work with. One thing my loved one and I shared in the past has been an appreciation for Eckhart Tolle's books, A New Earth and the Power of Now. And the following quote sums up where I am with our relationship. It's about acceptance. A genuine relationship is one that is not dominated by the ego with its image making and self-seeking. In a genuine relationship, there is an outward flow of open, alert attention towards the other person, in which there is no wanting whatsoever.
Thank you for joining us today. Please reach out if you have any questions or any comments. I'd like to leave you with this quote. A reminder, this is hard. This is necessary. This is your life too.